Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most well-known civil rights leaders of all time.
Not only working as a civil rights activist, he was also a minister and president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
All these things made him into a respectable leader who was able to do great justice for many people. MLK did not believe that fighting and violence would get you anywhere. He was for peaceful protesting and quiet but impactful sit-ins, boycotts, and more.
We can start off the video talking about Martin's early life.
Originally birthed as Michael King Jr., Martin was born as the middle child to Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. He was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia.
His father, Michael King, stepped in as a pastor for a small Ebenezer Baptist church in Atlanta when his father-in-law died. He became very successful in running the church and soon changed his name to Martin Luther King in honor of Protestant leader Martin Luther.
He had an older sister named Willie Christine and a younger brother named Alfred Daniel. He had a gentle, loving mother, but his father was a bit more strict while still remaining loving and a good influence.
Martin's parents, just like any other good parents, tried to prevent Martin from experiencing any sort of racism and prejudice. Martin became very passionate about this subject as he saw racism and segregation to be against God's will.
Many may not know that throughout Martin's younger years, he often questioned his faith in his religion and even thought about not entering the ministry.
Later in his junior year of high school, Martin took a Bible class which led him to renew his faith and convince himself that it was a good idea to join the ministry.
Martin Luther King Jr. was a valedictorian of his graduating Morehouse College in 1951, earning himself huge credibility for future appearances and speeches.
During Martin's last year in the seminary, he was largely impacted by Benjamin Mays, president of Morehouse College. Benjamin Mays was an advocate for racial equality and encouraged Martin to use his Christianity as a way to get the word out. After Morehouse, Martin attended Boston University and met his wife, Coretta Scott, there.
They had 4 children: Martin Luther King III, Dexter King, Yolanda King, and Bernice King. These 4 children were later mentioned in his famous I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial.
Have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
The speech was one of his most famous ones and one of the most talked about civil rights actions of all time.
Other things he did were things such as boycotts. After Rosa Parks was arrested for denying to give a white person a seat on the bus, African American citizens were enraged. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted 13 months, which led to the Supreme Court ruling it as unconstitutional.
Martin Luther King was chosen as a leader and spokesman for the city's boycotts.
Martin was also president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was a group of young African Americans that were fighting for simple civil rights.
The SCLC did 21 meetings around the South to spread the need for justice for young black people.
The group did things such as MLK visiting the Prime Minister of India to talk about it.
All of his work for civil rights earned him a Nobel Peace Prize for his leadership in civil rights acts all around the country in 1964.
Martin was sadly assassinated April 4th in 1968. He was on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel where he was shot in the neck and rushed to the hospital.
His death caused many riots around the city, and Martin was even called the Apostle of Nonviolence by former President Lyndon B. Johnson.
The legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. still lives on today by his grandchildren and children.
His granddaughter Yolanda even mentioned him in the March for Our Lives campaign, referencing his I Have a Dream speech.
My grandfather had a dream that his 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that enough is enough.
All in all, Martin Luther King Jr. was a person who was very involved in advancing for civil rights for African Americans while also promoting nonviolence.
Today, all around the nation, January 20th is seen as Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and kids are taught about his legacy and his life during the civil rights era, and his impact on life for African Americans after his death.
Martin Luther King Jr. was such an impact that there were about 900 streets named after him, including many of which are here in Georgia.
As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear.